Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us today. We're
Pleasure to be
privileged.
with you.
Thank you. Privileged to have you because wherever I see your name, I see best-selling author. I see you've published a few books, Leading with Purpose, The Future Leader, amongst others, a ranked #1 HR innovation and future of work global thought leader and influencer. You are on the Forbes Council. You have a number of titles under your name. Give us a brief intro and context.
Well, again, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. First and foremost, I'm a husband and father. I have 6 children. I've been married for 22
Wow.
years. And so I love my family. I'm a family man. I'm also a professor. So first and foremost, I'm a professor in the School of Business at Utah Valley University, where I've been for 16 years. I'm a chair and professor of organizational leadership, and that's my home base. And so I teach human resource management, organizational development, change management, organizational behavior, leadership, those types of courses. I conduct research in those areas, and I love it. That's the kind of stuff that I just get up for in the morning, and I love interacting with students and engaging with the community in those types of areas. But as a professor, I have a lot of autonomy, I have a lot of flexibility, and my being a professor is my home base, but I have lots of opportunity to go out and do other stuff. And in
Right.
fact, the university encourages us to go out and do other things. And so many years ago, back in 2007, I started my own consulting firm, Human Capital Innovations, and I do all sorts of different things under the auspice of Human Capital Innovations. I have a podcast, I run a magazine, I do consulting work, and I've been fortunate enough to do work that hopefully impacts and influences and supports and helps others. I want to help organizations be better. I want leaders to feel supported and know how they can lead better and help their teams. That's what I'm trying to do, and I appreciate the invitation to be here with you, and
Thank
hopefully
you.
our conversation today can do the same.
Thank you. I think just with 6 kids, you have a lot on your plate. So yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
and a shout out to my wife. Obviously, 6 kids. That's a huge undertaking for us. And my wife also, we're both have doctorates. We're both professors, and we do the co-parenting, thing. And our offices are just down the hall from each other at the university, and we tag team, teaching and researching and taking care of stuff at home. And she's awesome too.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, where did the passion come from? Like, why people? Why not the universe, as per your picture?
No,
On?
the universe. Honestly, if you were to look around my office, I have like all things science in here because I just love science. I love just like trying to understand why things work the way they work. Period. Like it doesn't even matter what you're talking about. I joke, I changed my major 4 times as an undergrad student, and I graduated with like a ridiculous number of credits. At least in the US, you usually have to graduate with 120 credits. As an undergrad student, I graduated with 167 credits as an undergrad
Wow.
student because I was like one of those ridiculous students. I changed majors a bunch of times from all these different disciplines. I had this silly idea that I wanted to be like well-rounded, and I wanted to explore and do different things. And so I took like all sorts of electives that had nothing to do with my major, and all that kind of stuff. So that's partly just kind of like how I approach things. When it really comes to people, honestly, it goes back to just my family, my upbringing. I'm a little bit of the odd duck in my family in that I ended up going the business route, but I'm not really that far afield. Most of my family are psychologists and social workers.
Okay.
So most of them are counselors, therapists, or they're social workers. And I feel like what I do is the same thing, but it's just within an organizational setting. Like I'm an organizational therapist.
Right.
I feel like it's largely the same skill set, but it's just in a different setting. And I don't know, I just grew up that way. Like I grew up just thinking that way. I grew up analyzing. So I can't help it. Like I walk into a room and I just see how people interact. I see how people like interpersonally. I see how people like from both the micro and the macro level, how the systems are at play that are influencing how people are interacting. And so as a kid, I just remember thinking that way with my parents, because those were like the types of family conversations we would have, as a kid. And so as I grew up, I think that way. And as I had my first jobs as a kid, as a teenager, and growing into adulthood and going to college, I started to gravitate towards the social sciences, and I eventually end up, not going into social work like most of my family. I come from a family of 8 children. My parents are both therapists, and social workers. And so they all went into those types of fields, and I'm the one that didn't. But, as I went into more of the organizational setting, again, I found myself gravitating more towards like HR, org design, those types of things that, like, I think are really pretty much the same thing, just a slightly different setting. And I
Mm,
really just am always fascinated by, why do people do what they do? What influences that? Interpersonally, why do people, like, what leads to conflict, and how do you resolve that? Not just on the interpersonal level, but also on the systems level. And what can organizations do about that? From a
mm,
social work standpoint, you might think about, what can societies do? What can governments do at a systems level to try to deal with, domestic violence or those types of social issues? At an organizational level, I think about the same things. Like, what can organizations do from a policy, practice, and procedure standpoint to try to deal with the types of common problems that organizations face with their people day in and day out? So those are the types of things that I just always think about, and I always have.
okay. I want to take that and I want to put it into the conversation of today. A lot of what I see being talked about is around, I mean, we won't even call it the future of work because it's the present of work, and how the present of work has shifted. Explain how you see that context and what needs to happen with that.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, even just a few years ago, when we would say the future of work, you know, I kind of have seen myself as a futurist, so to speak. And if you go back in time, like, I was writing stuff 10 years ago about the future of work that 100% we're living today. Almost all those things that I was writing about back then, all the remote, the hybrid, a lot of just the socioeconomic dynamics, all of those types of things have come to pass. They've come to pass faster than I thought they would. And I think that's probably the case for most prognosticators, a decade ago. And in large part, that was due to the pandemic, that just
Mm,
accelerated and sped everything up faster than I think a lot of us thought. But the reality is, what many of us were thinking a decade ago or so, we're kind of living it right now, like you said. So I guess the question now is, like, what is the new future of
right.
work? Like, what are we thinking? And it's, you never really know. I mean, let me say that on the outset. We don't have a crystal ball. We never have, and we don't now. So I don't really know, but we do have. We can look at past trends. We can look at where we've been over the last century, over the last 50 years, over the last couple of decades. We can see how things have evolved even over the last 5 years. We can see how things like generative AI and large learning models have impacted things even over the last couple of years, and how dramatic of a shift those, you know, what that has caused, and how
Mm,
the dramatic shifts that have come about because of those. And so it's very reasonable to project forward what could happen and what would probably likely happen in the coming years, and even in the next 5 to 10 years. I would say, because of the rapid pace of change, I don't know. It's hard to even say. Like, I I would say, I'm not even willing to even suggest maybe 5 years out or beyond 5 years out, because it's just so rapidly
so
changing.
different.
It's so hard to say. Like, you read some of these reports of, like, 2050, the 2050 report from whatever consultancy or whatever. Like,
Right,
who knows? Like, 2050, my
right.
goodness. Like, the robots could be taking over the world by 2050.
Yeah.
Who knows? I personally, like, let's step aside for a second. Like, on the spectrum of, like, Terminator, a post-apocalyptic future, versus like Star Trek utopian future, I tend to lean more towards like the Star Trek
Right.
future. Like, I tend to think like AI and advanced robotics and all of that kind of stuff is going to lead us more towards like a wonderful future. I'm optimist that way. But there's things we got to figure out for sure in terms of ethical AI and ethical automation, and societies need to figure out what does that mean for displacement of work, and what does that mean for universal wage, and all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of stuff we got to figure out. But I tend to be optimistic, and I tend to think we're going to figure it out, and that ultimately it's going to free up more of our time to do cool, creative things, and that hopefully we can lean into it, and as a species and humanity, we'll be able to do really cool stuff, and we'll be like a Star Trek utopian future. So that's my hope. Okay. With that said, if I look into the future, and I'm thinking the next up to the next 5 years, what does the future of work look like? I really do think we're going to see more of the same. We're going to see more discomfort. We're going to see more people feeling really nervous about displacement of their jobs, but not just displacement of jobs, really displacement of tasks. That's, I think, the number one thing people are currently feeling. Most people aren't seeing their jobs go away. They're seeing pieces of their jobs go away. They're seeing particular tasks that they used to do being automated. And so now they're thinking, that 20% of my job, I don't really have to do anymore, because now AI can do it, or this new program can do it, or whatever. And so now they're worried. They're like, am I becoming obsolete? How do I justify my job? And I think that's a reasonable concern, a reasonable fear. And I think we all need to, on a regular basis, think about, why am I here? What value do I add to the organization? Why am I important? And I think if we take a look at it from the personal, like, employee level first, I think that's a healthy thing for us to think about. I know I think about it all the time. Even as a professor, I have about the most stable job there is as a tenured professor, but I think about it all the time. I think about, why am I here as a professor? If AI can produce content, if it can, even video content, like an AI avatar, if an AI avatar can produce video lectures with lecture content that's like top notch, like, will I need to be here in 5 years? And I don't know, like, maybe not. So what's the value that I bring? And I'll tell you what value I don't bring. If I'm hanging my hat on being the sage on the stage, where I just show up to the classroom and just lecture to my students, then I am ensuring that I'm becoming obsolete in my job. The value that I add is that I am a mentor to my students, that I'm a coach to my students. It's the more one-on-one attention. It's it's the stuff that can't be automated through the content delivery. That stuff, for one, there's tons of content already out there. Two, more and more, we're going to be able to automate that content, and we're going to be able to produce more and more of that content. So it's about, how can I use my expertise gained over, I'm 45, so gained over 45 years of life on this planet, and my career, and my work experience, and my research, and all that. How can I leverage that to give students a top-notch educational experience through personal coaching, mentoring, career development, etc.? That's something AI and robots can't do. How can I do that? And if I'm just doing the traditional kind of show up to class, lecturing, whatever, I will be obsolete. I won't be worth my position, So I need to think about that, and I need to level up, and I need to make sure that I'm worth it. And everyone needs to do that. Everyone in all their jobs, all their positions need to be doing that. And if I'm just sitting back thinking I should be able to just do what I've always done, you're wrong. If that's how you're approaching your job, you will be obsolete. You will eventually work yourself out of a job. So employees need to be thinking about how they can ensure that they are valuable. From an employer side, they're thinking about, well, if there's either voluntary or involuntary turnover, and this person's job, I've been able to automate 20-30% of it, it's not about necessarily replacing the whole job, but it's like, maybe I've had 3 people leave, and now I'm only going to replace 2 of the 3 positions, right? And so slowly over time, you don't need as many people on the team. Maybe you had, 5 recruiters, and now you only need 2 instead of 5, or something like that. And so Slowly over time, we're going to see more and more displacement of tasks and then jobs. Slowly, we might even see entire types of positions get displaced, even entire types of traditionally what we've held as certain careers get displaced. That will continue, and that will cause pain for people, particularly those who aren't willing to level up, to reskill and upskill, and make sure that they're staying valuable to their organizations.
Absolutely. I'm hearing two things from what you say. I'm hearing from an employee perspective, it's important to not just upskill, but think differently about how you work. And then from a head of people perspective, for example, take a head of people. I have my CEO on my case who's like, we need a scale, we need people to be productive. And I, as the head of people person, am concerned about the people in the organization. What is the role of the head of people? Knowing that the team needs to skill up, and the business needs to scale up.
Yeah. Well, one thing, as a people leader, as a head of people, I'd be talking to team leads, others throughout the hierarchy of the organization about, making sure your team understands what it means to scale up. And scaling up doesn't necessarily mean growing your team. It can also mean scaling in terms of efficiency and productivity. So if an individual team can 2 or 3x their productivity because they're leveraging these tools, generative AI, large language models, that they're valuable, right? So we don't need to be scared of these tools if we can learn how to use them and leverage them and demonstrate we are so valuable because we used to be able to do X and now we can do 3X, and that brings value to the company, and we can increase revenue, we can, decrease waste, whatever, the metric is. That is a value, and that speaks to ROI, and that speaks to the CEO and whoever it is that's looking at those types of metrics. That is what organizations want to be able to see. And so it's not just about cutting jobs. It's not just about
No.
getting rid of people. It's about like scaling up. It's about showing how can we do more. Again, I don't want to make it all about me, but coming back to my example, I need to, as a professor, I can't just like rest on my laurels and show, just do what I might have done 20 years ago as a professor. But also, if I learn how to leverage tools, I can be more productive. I can do way more than I maybe used to do as a professor. And in fact, that is what I do. Like as an individual, I would say today, as we're talking, I'm 5 times more productive as I was 10 years ago as a professor. In part because
Wow.
I'm just more experienced and more knowledgeable, in part because I know how to leverage technology better than I did 10 years ago. And all of us should be learning how to leverage technology better so that we can do that and add value to those around us.
What is the best way, in your opinion, to learn how to leverage technology?
You know, I mean, there's courses, obviously, you can do formal training. I just like to play with stuff. So
Test and learn.
yeah, I mean, just trial and error and play with stuff and iterate. I'm a big believer in design thinking and just iterate rapidly and try things and put yourself in an environment where you can fail rapidly and learn from your experiences, and fail in a safe environment where it's not actually failing but you're just learning, and then you can tweak and try again. And I find myself in those types of environments where I can just try and try and try and try, and very quickly I can realize, oh, that didn't work, but now, a week later, I find myself in a situation where I can do something really cool that a week ago I couldn't do because I figured something out. And that is a lot of fun to be able to do that.
What you are talking about there is a mindset of learning, or a culture of learning, which, I mean, from our perspective, is really why we exist. Because without that, you can't adapt to the future.
Yeah.
if you can be that brutal about the impact of learning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm a forever student. I'm a
Yeah,
professor.
you
I
can't
joke with
speak
my students, I'm going to be in college for forever. So, I just take that, I hope I always have that mindset with me. I just want to learn, I want to try things, and I hope that never goes away. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest challenge that you see, not AI itself, facing organizations.
Oh, geez. I mean, there's a lot. I think just the overall complexity of the world we're in today, it's really hard for leaders, for anyone who's in a leadership role, CEO, C-suite, all the way down, anyone who's leading. It's tough. I mean, I don't think it's ever been as hard to lead as it is today, just
Mm,
because of the ambiguity, the complexity. It requires so much agility and flexibility. And it's just so hard to do that day in and day out. Leaders carry a big weight. They're expected to do so much for their people. We talk about people-centric leadership, vulnerable leadership, compassionate leadership, all the things. Like, you're expected to do all these things while still getting results. And yet leaders usually don't have that for themselves. And so you carry this weight, usually with not a lot of support for yourself. And it's really easy to get burnt out. It's really easy to just buckle under that weight. And so I would say for leaders, try to do those things for your team, because it's really, really important. Practice self-care and practice, making sure that you're taking care of your needs. I do think the best leaders, the successful, like sustainable, long-term successful organizations, are going to be the ones that have those leaders that are able to practice, those, and create those healthy types of
mm,
organizations where they're practicing those things. And a lot of organizations, frankly, just don't have them, because they kind of rose up under a more kind of quote unquote traditional model, a different style of leadership, different kind of style of organizational design, and they're not adjusting and adapting fast enough to this new reality, this new world of work. And if they're not agile enough, flexible enough, they're going to become dinosaurs and obsolete. And I think that's the biggest challenge today for any organization and for any leader, uh, to just be able to adapt quickly enough.
mm, mm. Jonathan, I recognize how many other commitments you have. My final question for you is your drop the mic philosophy that you would like to suggest people live by or navigate the change by.
Drop the mic philosophy. I would say there's a Korean proverb. I've spent quite a bit of time in Asia. I lived in South Korea for a few years. There's a Korean proverb, chulam jie, means bluer than indigo. And it relates to this idea of servant leadership. So bluer than indigo, indigo is like the bluest, most vibrant blue. So the idea is, as a leader, I want to become bluer than indigo. I want to surpass, I want to help. So indigo would be like the leader, the teacher, who in an Asian culture they hold up with great reverence. As a leader, if I'm indigo, that vibrant blue, I want to help the people I lead to become bluer than indigo, or
Wow.
greater than the leader, greater than the teacher. So there's no ego there. It's not me holding myself up above other people. It's me seeing my role as developing others, building them up, and helping them to become the best they can possibly be, even becoming greater than maybe I ever was. I like that idea of servant leadership. I like that idea of just like getting your ego out of the way. It's not about me as a leader, it's about the people I lead.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Jonathan, to end off, you will be talking at a conference. I think it is called the AI HR Playbook
Yes,
in a few weeks. So the audience can catch you there, and we will be putting the links to your podcast in the show.
perfect. Thank you so much.